Shabbat Shalom. So this week's Parshat Korach, doesn't exactly open with a sense of calm, right? It begins with rebellion, tension. It ends with the earth swallowing the rebels whole, right? But hidden in this story of what feels like chaos is a quiet legacy of hope. One that reemerges, as I mentioned or I hinted at, generations later in our Haftorah. So I want to reflect on this for a few minutes. We'll get to the Haftorah in a minute, but this idea of a legacy being transformed. Can a legacy that begins in arrogance or rupture, right, the way that this story unfolds with Korach, can it eventually lead to humility and healing? Can something, or really someone, so wrong ultimately give rise to something that is so right? And I want to think about that for a moment and ponder historically whether we can come up with one or two examples of something starting off so wrong, but yet turns out so right. All right? I have my own examples I will share, all right? But anything come to mind? We'll take one or two. The Altalena, right? So the Altalena is a story of the Irgun. There is a ship bringing weapons, and the Irgun is, they're intended for the Irgun. They're on the ship, and David Ben-Gurion orders the Sahal, the army at the time, to the Palmach, to whoever, to fire on the ship. This is Jew firing on Jew, pre-state. Might have actually been after 48. I'm blanking on the exact timeline of it. Menachem Begin, who up until that point had been the sort of radical revolutionary. I speak a lot about Menachem Begin. He said to his fellow Irgun soldiers, do not fire back. All right? Jew does not kill a Jew. That becomes an ethic for the state of Israel. So out of that very tragic moment when many members of the Irgun lost their lives, emerged an ethic that would define Menachem Begin's life and hopefully define, for the most part, right, the feeling in Israel about civil unrest. Right? Great. Any other thoughts? Any other examples maybe historically of something starting out in rupture but gives rise to something whole? So I'll give you one other example biblically. It's an important example. It's important because it actually changed Judaism as we know it. So the king of Israel, Manasseh, ruled you can read about this in the second book of Kings, chapter 21. He ruled for 55 years. He is remembered as one of the most disastrous, idolatrous, corrupt kings in our history. He introduced pagan worship into the temple. He practiced sorcery. He even engaged in some child sacrifice just to round out the story. And it's often cited that his leadership gives rise to the exile. Yet, independent of this, in 2 Chronicles, he's taken captive in Babylon and Bavel, and he repents, he prays, he's forgiven, et cetera, et cetera. More important to our story is that his grandson or great-grandson, I just have to get the genealogy correct, is a king named Josiah. King Josiah starts ruling the land of Israel, or the kingdom, when he's 8 years old, and he brings in one of the most profound religious revivals in the history of our people. Upon discovering, it's a sort of a strange story. It's a little longer than I'm going to go into, but someone uncovers a Torah scroll in like a drawer as they are renovating the temple. And probably they think the book of Deuteronomy. He sees this, he reads it, he has this religious awakening, he launches into sweeping reforms into practice. He eradicates idols, he renews national worship, he brings back the Passover observance with passion and precision. The text refers to him that he turned to the Lord with all his heart and soul and might. right? Josiah is known to be one of the great kings in our tradition, even though he descends down from one of the most corrupt monarchs in the history of our people. So despite this sort of dark spiritual legacy, Josiah becomes for us a model of religious leadership. He refuses to be trapped by the past, and instead, he literally rewrites his family's spiritual legacy. And the point we can take away from this is that the chain of descent does not lock the soul's direction. We can overcome our past. We can overcome our ancestors. Even when we inherit brokenness, we can choose integrity and we can choose healing. All right? So that is at least one of many examples I could give, both in our history and outside of our history, of people overcoming these kinds of odds and rewriting their future, not being held captive by their past. So let's go back to our story. I want you to keep that in mind. It's an important point we'll come back to. Because just to refresh our memories, Korach, now we're back to the Torah portion. Korach, along with Datan, Abiram, Korach, as I said, is from the tribe of Levi. Datan and Abiram are from the tribe of Reuven. And a large gang of disgruntled tribal princes rise up against Moses. They challenge him and Aaron to try to grab leadership from them. And Korach, they lose. They are swallowed up by the earth. It is not a pretty scene in biblical literature. All right, that's the story of Korach. Fast forward several generations later into the biblical story, and the Israelites are living in the land. They have gone from the wilderness into the land of Israel. Things aren't going so well. If you read the book of Judges, you'll see that it's a story of constant the ebb and flow of life in the land of Israel, right? There's a period of stability. A foreign king rises up. They overtake the land of Israel. People suffer. They're oppressed. And then a judge, or what we would call some spiritual hero, rises up. And the same cycle happens over and over again until the people say to God that they want a king. They want to be like everybody else. So the prophet Samuel is chosen to appoint a king. And Samuel does. He appoints Shaul. And this takes us now to the Haftarah for this morning's Torah reading, who promptly goes on to a great military victory. Samuel then takes Shaul where? To Gilgal for the formal inauguration of his kingship. All right, so the people can sort of loudly affirm this new king. And of course, in the moment, Samuel the prophet, he rebukes the Israelites for wanting a king. He reiterates that he has always been sort of above board as a prophet. He's always been above board as a leader, which is a connection to the Torah reading, because at the end of Parshat, in Parshat Korach, Moses essentially says the same thing. Like, I'm blameless here. All right, so that's one connection. It's not the connection I want to focus on. And this affirmation takes place in Gilgal. Everybody with me so far? The question is, why Gilgal? Of all the places to go and affirm this moment of coronation, why would Samuel take the people to Gilgal? Which, by the way, today it's not exactly certain where Gilgal is. It's either near the town of Jericho in Israel, or it might be a little further north in the Jordan Valley. There's not great certainty of where Gilgal is today. Okay? Why Gilgal? Why not, why not take them to Jerusalem? Why not I don't know, you could come up with any other number of biblical places. Boris, you've been waiting, right? Patiently, all right? Why Gilgal?
Because Gilgal is the site that the Israelites came when they entered the Holy Land, and they were assembled in Gilgal under Joshua.
Correct. So when the Israelites came into the land, all right,
Hold on.
they came through Gilgal. I'll just read you a little bit. This is in the 4th chapter, and there's actually a comment. If you look at the beginning of the Haftarah, Brian, do you want to read that comment under the line for us, just so it puts into perspective a little bit about What is the spiritual, religious? It's a very first comment on the Haftarah. All right. I can't. I could, but it's like the Melton strategy. Brian's got to find the text on his own. He needs biblical literacy. Know where the books are. All right. He's got it. I know he does.
Okay.
All right. Read the comment, please.
Gilgal, an old site with sacred connotations. After the Israelites' entrance into Canaan, Joshua performed a mass circumcision there, initiating the settlement of the land. As a home for the tabernacle and the ark, it was also a center of national life. The monarchy is now ritually inaugurated there.
It's a very important place. I'll just add a little bit, thank you, Brian, from the 4th chapter of the book of Joshua, where we're reading the story about this entrance. And Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan. He charged the Israelites as follows. In time to come, think about this, right? In time to come, when your children ask their parents, what's the meaning of these stones, right? We've heard a form of this question before. Right? What is all this? Tell your children, here the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry land. For the eternal your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you crossed, just as the eternal your God did to the Sea of Reeds, which dried up before us until we crossed. Thus all the people of the earth shall know how mighty is God's hand, and you shall fear God, the eternal your God always. So there are all kinds of things happening in Gilgal that have serious religious, spiritual significance and historical significance to the Jewish people. They crossed over the Jordan River to land. There was a great miracle that happened there. The stones of memory are set up for future generations, right? The circumcision of the community takes place. So the Haftarah, the connection, isn't just about the fact that Moses and Samuel both said to their respective communities, we did a lot of good, right? I'm blameless. I didn't steal. I didn't rob, right? I didn't take your donkeys. I'm good. All right, but here Gilgal is front and center to remind the Israelites about their history, how God brought them to the land, their own spiritual commitments, especially, as we read, symbolized by the covenant of circumcision. By the way, it raises another question of why weren't these people circumcised in the first place if they were Israelites? That's a whole other question that we will address another time. And there in Gilgal, again, Samuel warns the people, a king is, a king is going to come at a cost. Yeah, you'll be like everybody else, but the king might be self-aggrandizing. The king might oppress you, right? At Gilgal, we are reminding you, the people of Israel, who you are and where you come from, regardless of who your king is. Regardless of the values that your king espouses, remember Israelites, remember the Jewish people, who you are and who we are to be, right? I'm going to add one more layer to this, because in addition to Gilgal, what you might not know is that Samuel the prophet, is a direct descendant of Korach. Right? He is his great. I actually, if you look in the first book of Chronicles, where is this? I'm trying to figure out this genealogy this morning. It's like 1 Chronicles chapter 6. You'll see a genealogy. Somewhere in like the 5 to 7 great-grandchild range, Samuel the prophet descends down from Korach. All right, now that is a fascinating spin on the connection between the Haftarah and the story itself. All right? Because we see even a more poignant connection to this story. Korach tried to tear the people apart with his rebellion, and Samuel is trying to put the people back together, right? And it is important for us to think about that, right? Because what happens at Gilgal, this place of deep historical resonance, is that Samuel is telling us that leadership must be rooted in memory. Right? He knows his own lineage. Right? He knew what we didn't know. He knew that his great-great-great-great-grandfather tried to literally uproot and destroy the Israelites through this rebellion. And instead of running from his past, Samuel uses it and he draws strength from it as a moral anchor, a foundation of moral clarity. And I think it's worth us considering for a few minutes here what our Gilgals are. How do we anchor ourselves? How do we find that sense of moral clarity in a world that doesn't always feel so morally clear? And the Haftarah, in light of this story, right, is telling us that Gilgal is more than just a physical location. After crossing the Jordan, God brings the Israelites to Gilgal to affirm or reaffirm the covenant with God. And in our lives, as I said, we too have Gilgals, places, rituals, memories that we return to in order to remember who we are, where we come from, and what we stand for. Unintentionally, Peter modeled that this morning by breaking out his Haftarah book from his bar mitzvah. Imagine reading from the exact same book. Not, we say, the Eitz Chaim, it's the same biblical text that we've been reading for thousands of years, right? No, the exact book that I used at my bar mitzvah 67 years ago is that kind of moral spiritual anchor. That's what I'm talking about when I ask us to consider our Gilgals, right? Where do we find them? What are they? Right? I'm going to open it up for 3 minutes, okay? And then we're going to wrap up. All right? Talk to me. Anyone have any thoughts about where you could find those kinds of spiritual, moral anchors in our tradition or elsewhere? Any thoughts? Boris.
I have only one comment when it comes to this, because what happened to the children of Korah, Bnei Korah? When you read Tehillim, in Tehillim is Bnei Korah, that they were standing, in front of the temple. Was that the same Korah?
Yeah. So, Boris, it's a great question, and the rabbinic literature is clear about this when they talk about the children of Korah not dying. And of course, they go on to create some of the Psalms, right? Some of the Psalms are labeled Korach. I'm just going to, I have a source on this. So it wasn't erased. The sons of Korach become temple singers, right? They sing the Psalms. As I said, Samuel emerges as a prophet of extraordinary moral strength. And I think the lesson, as I said at the very beginning, to draw from in the story of Josiah is that Judaism believes in redemptive possibilities across generations. Right? One of my favorite rabbinic sources is that it's actually connected to the book of Samuel, when the reason Shaul loses the kingship is because God tells him to kill the king Agag, right away. He doesn't. He lets him live, and then Samuel, catches wind of this and goes over and kills him. But in the interim time between Saul not killing the king and Samuel doing it, the rabbis imagine that the king had relations with a woman, there were children, and it's these children who are the ancestors to Haman. All right? Now, that's only part of the story. The Gemara then also imagines that the descendants of Haman are studying Torah in a yeshiva in Bnei Brak. Right? So again, right? Judaism is a tradition that believes in redemption across generations. All right? And it's a great question. We don't know, but we deduce what happened to these sons of Korach, as the Torah tells us, who didn't die. And the rabbis see that as an opportunity to pull out this lesson about generational redemption. Right? Any other thoughts about Gilgal? Mira, we might have a hand all the way in the back. Cantor Davis. All right? And then I'll give you a few.
I think at the beginning, children of Israel, they have given the Ten Commandments with the Promised Land. And that is a country for the example of every country in the world. And also, the first wisdom is the fear of God. And Israelis, children of Israel, they have always the fear of God. And they don't want to fight, I think, in my opinion. And
So I'm gonna stop you there. Thank you. You raised the issue of Israel, and I think that is a place, right? When we think about the moral anchors, right? Touchstone places in Israel that we may go feel that. It might be for some the Western Wall. It might be walking through the cemetery on the Mount of Olives and seeing the graves of Israel, or Har Herzl, or going to a kibbutz that was part of the early block of settlements who were facts on the ground of security, right? All of these places, all of these experiences are this sort of Gilgal moment that I'm talking about. You could also think of it in terms of, we had a few anniversaries of B'nai Mitzvah this morning, childhood synagogues, right, where our tradition first took root. I had a meeting this week with someone I grew up with, and we were talking about our synagogue growing up, and I still hear my rabbi's voice in my head, right? That is a place I go to, right, when I think about spiritual leadership. It could be visiting graves of loved ones, right? People before the holidays will go to visit their parents or ancestors or family members' graves, where we, I always say in moments of what we call them unveiling, it's a cheap translation of what it actually is. In Hebrew, it's hakamat matzeva. It is the establishment of a monument, right? We're taking a cheesecloth off a stone, but actually what we're doing is we are inaugurating, establishing a place where we can physically go to reconnect with the values of the loved ones who came before us, right? Visiting a family home. I see you, Deborah, 1 second, all right? I happened to be home a few months ago. I was in my hometown, and I drove by, as I always do, our home, just to see it, just to think about growing up there and the people who lived on the block and the friends we had in the neighborhood, right? There are narrative, there are ritual spaces that serve this purpose, right? I mentioned the Haftorah book that Peter used, or oftentimes at weddings, people will bring family heirlooms like sidurim or candlesticks. We may not even use them under the chuppah. They just want them there because this is a moment of sort of crossing boundaries, that they want the comfort of being surrounded by these types of moments. The memories of a Friday night dinner, right? Of being together with family on Shabbat. These all serve as those kind of moments on why Shmuel insisted that the place to take these people inaugurating the king, to remind them of who they are, it's not just about the king, it's about you, is Gilgal, which is where the story took root inside the land of Israel. Deborah, I want to go to you, and then we'll wrap it up.
I just want to say that this synagogue, for many of us, is a place where we have our memories and our spirituality, and it always, it represents that for us, even though it might not be from our childhood, but it's part of our history and our lives.
Well, that's like part of growing up, right? That you create your own places, right? We don't all, there are actually a lot of generational families here, but a lot of kids I grew up with didn't stay in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, right? Some did. So there's the work, there's the task of finding your own spiritual path and creating those memories that you're talking about, All right? And it's not just memory for the sake of memory, it's memory to remind us of our values and who we are. We all inherit things. We all inherit something. Family traits, personal blessings, personal burdens, community strengths, community wounds, right? It's all part of the fabric of our lives, but we are not defined by what we inherit, right? That's the story of this Haftorah, right? There's a reason why it's Samuel who's doing this, right? We are defined by what we build from it. Korach leaves behind a legacy of rebellion, but Samuel rehabilitates it. He reconstitutes it. He transforms it into a legacy of conscience. And that's the Jewish story. From descent to ascent, from arrogance to humility, from rupture to repair. Every generation has its Korach, but it also has its Shmuel, it also has its Samuel. And if we remember where we come from, it's possible that we can be that Samuel too. May we be leaders, may we be Jews who remember. May we be grounded in history, inspired by the hope that comes from it, and may we, like Shmuel, turn difficult legacies into sacred responsibilities. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for joining the Park Avenue Synagogue family. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Please consider supporting our online community by scanning the QR code or by going to supportpas.org or by making a donation. Shalom and see you in Shul.